The Tennessee Volunteers are one of the most historic programs in all of college football, as they have multiple national titles, have a spectacular history, and have so much pageantry. Unfortunately, they have not been able to get back to title contending relevance since the early 2000s, and while there have been some bright spots, there have been a lot of lows over the last 10 to 15 years. Most recently, Jeremy Pruitt kind of put the program in some rough water, as there are some scandals and NCAA violations that have come along with it, and while we don't know the consequences yet, Tennessee's likely going to face something in the future. But as of right now, all we can worry about is 2021, as they have a whole new head coach, a new athletic director, and the program is finally headed in a new direction. In today's video, I want to preview the 2021 Tennessee football team, go through their roster, depth chart, schedule, and all the major storylines, and talk about the truth about the Volunteers team. But right before we get into that, I'm going to need you guys to subscribe as we are on the road to 100K, and every single one of you guys helps, and I appreciate it, so be sure to hit that button. And now let's get started and talk about Tennessee football. Before we can talk about the 2021 season, let's go back to 2020 and rewind how they did last year. They had third-year head coach Jeremy Pruitt, and expectations were pretty high for last year's team as they started out ranked. It seemed like it was Jarek Guarantano's 15th year as a starting quarterback for Tennessee, and while he struggled a lot last year, he still started the majority of the games, which really held them back in my opinion, and thankfully he is now at Washington State, where hopefully he can save his career. The Volunteers started out with a close win over South Carolina, and then in week 2 had a dominating performance against Missouri, who actually ended up being a pretty solid team last year. Going into the first half against number 3 Georgia, they actually played pretty well, and it was tied 14-14 at one point, and I'll admit myself, I was thinking that Tennessee football was back. Then Georgia put the Volunteers back to reality as they blew them out in the second half, and Tennessee lost 44-21. Tennessee lost 34-7 at home against Kentucky, lost 48-17 against Alabama, lost to Arkansas, and lost to Florida. The one bright spot about that stretch is that Harrison Bailey finally got to play a little bit against the Gators, as I do believe he is the future of the team and the next great quarterback for that program. Thankfully, things weren't too bad, as despite getting scored on by Sarah Fuller, they did end up beating Vanderbilt 42-17 for their third win of the year. They finished the season with a game against number 5 Texas A&M, in which they lost by multiple scores. Overall, they finished at 3-7, and then recruiting violations from Jeremy Pruitt and his staff came to light, and it was time to move on from the Jeremy Pruitt era. They first hired Danny White, the athletic director from UCF, and in what was not a shocker at all, they decided to hire UCF head coach Josh Heupel to be the new head man. While some people don't like this hire, as they think he was a bad coach at UCF and that he was starting to lose his grip on the program there, I actually really like this hire. Nothing Tennessee has done in the past has seemingly worked, and Heupel is a dude who brings an offensive system, and he's still pretty young. He spent some time at Oklahoma, helped coach Drew Lock at Missouri, and has spent the last few years as a head coach. He's someone who's going to make Tennessee bearable to watch this year, and that's what they need. Fans will show up to a game if a team is losing, but it is at least entertaining to watch, and that's how I think it will be next year. I think the defense will potentially be a struggle, but with his passer-friendly system, Tennessee should at least be able to stay in some games and put up some points, which is all they need to do. If we take a look at their 2021 recruiting class, it ranked number 23 in the country and 8th best in the SEC. It was headlined by Aaron Willis, Cayman Marley, and Julian Nixon, as their big-time quarterback Caden Salter ended up getting dismissed from the program and is now at Liberty. In terms of the transfer portal, they did lose a couple guys, but they definitely made their mark there. They grabbed a corner from Alabama, a corner from Auburn, a linebacker from Michigan, a linebacker from Texas, a defensive lineman from Kansas, a defensive lineman from USC, Mississippi State wide receiver Javonte Payton, Michigan quarterback Joe Milton, USC kicker Chase McGrath, and finally Virginia Tech quarterback Hennan Hooker. 2 of those guys were quarterbacks, and now we can go straight into that battle. Now that Jarrett G is finally gone, we can see a new face for once at this quarterback spot. There were originally 5 options, but as I said, Salter was dismissed, so now there are 4. As I've been doing some research for this, it seems like Brian Maurer is definitely 4th on the depth chart, and I'm concerned that he's never going to see the field. And while he has a very inspiring story and has played a couple games, I just don't think he's the direction that Josh Heupel wants to go. So there are really 3 main guys. Joe Milton was compared to Cam Newton coming out of high school, and apparently Urban Meyer said he was the scariest player on Michigan at one point. He wasn't that terrifying for the Wolverines last year though, as he struggled tremendously and was benched in favor of Cade McNamara at one point. But Joe Milton has all that potential in the world, and he's looking for a fresh start at Tennessee, so I do wonder if he'll get some snaps. Next up, you have Hennan Hooker, who has started 2 years at Virginia Tech, and while his 2019 season was his best, I blame a lot of his inconsistencies on that coaching staff at Virginia Tech, and Hooker is a dual threat guy with experience who I think has an opportunity to play right away. But both of those guys are backups in my eyes, and Harrison Bailey is the future of the team. Coming out of the state of Georgia, Bailey was a top 100 recruit and someone who has been receiving praise for years. He got a chance to play in a couple games last year, and when I watched him, it just seemed like he wanted to win and that he has that it factor. I believe Harrison Bailey will start, and while I don't think Tennessee will do that well this year, I think Bailey will show a glimpse of the future and be that guy very soon. Tennessee took a big step back in the running back department, and in my opinion, this will be a concern this year. They lost their star Eric Gray to Oklahoma, and they lost their backup Ty Chandler to North Carolina. Both of those guys will likely start at their respective schools this year, and now Tennessee's got to replace them. In my opinion, there are 3 guys who are going to really play a big role this year, and the first one includes Jabari Small. He looked pretty good last year as a freshman, and according to a lot of my research, many believe he's going to break out. The next guy is Tion Evans, who came out of Hutchinson Community College, as he was one of the top JUCO running backs in the country, brings some experience and has a lot of talent, and he should play right away as well. The final guy who I've been hearing a ton about lately, and I actually mentioned in my video about SEC freshmen who could play right away, is Jalen Hyatt. He's a true freshman coming out of North Carolina, but he has been gaining a ton of praise in camp right now, and he's going to push for some snaps. Other guys who could potentially see the field include D. Beckwith, Fred Orr, Antonio Malone, Lenneth Whitehead, and Patrick Wilk. I'm curious to see how this position plays out, but either way, it should be fun to see who emerges. The Volunteers lost Brandon Johnson to UCF and Josh Palmer to the NFL, so they will have to replace arguably their top 2 weapons. Thankfully, there is a lot of talent there, and some guys who I'm really pumped to watch. First and foremost, Jalen Hyatt showed a ton of flash as a freshman last year, and many expect him to be the top receiver on the team. They got some help in the transfer portal as they landed Javonte Payton from Mississippi State, and also USC transfer Velus Jones. Guys like Cedric Tillman and Ramel Keaton will be back as well, and one guy who I've been hearing a ton about lately is Jimmy Callaway. He's a sophomore, and apparently their wide receivers coach can't say enough good things about him, so maybe we will see him push for playing time. Finally, the other guys in the mix include Jimmy Holiday, Anderson Kobe, Walker Merrill, and Julian Nixon. And I'm pumped to see which guy becomes the next big thing. At the tight end spots, you're likely going to see Princeton Fant and Austin Pope. And then getting to the offensive line, at left tackle, the projected starter is Dane Davis. At left guard, you're going to have Jerome Carvin. At center, you're going to have Cooper Mays. At right guard, you're going to have Cade Mays. And finally, at right tackle, you're going to have Darnell Wright. Switching over to the defensive side of the ball, at the tackle spots, you're going to have Aubrey Solomon, Matthew Butler, and Omari Davis. Then you'll also have guys like Elijah Simmons, Dejon Terry, and Karat Garland. At the defensive end spot, you're going to have Latrell Bumpus, Caleb Tremblay, and Jaquan Blakely. And then at that final spot, you're going to have Tyler Barron. At the linebacker positions, you lose Henry Tuoto, so Texas transfer Juwan Mitchell should step up right away, and former running back Jeremy Banks should also play. At the will linebacker spot, you're going to have Aaron Willis and Aaron Beasley, and at that rush spot, you're going to have Byron Young and Roman Harrison. Finally, at that viper position, it'll be Tamarian McDonald and William Mohan. Looking to their secondary, at the nickel spot, you're going to have Theo Jackson and Kamal Haddon, and at the corner spots, you're going to have Warren Burrell, Kenneth George, Christian Charles, Alante Taylor, Bama transfer Brandon Turnage, and Kamal Haddon. Finally, at those safety positions, you're going to have Jalen McCullough and Tamarian McDonald, and then Trayvon Flowers and Tyus Fields. I'm not a Tennessee football expert by any means, and I did my best research, so be sure to correct me if I'm wrong. Give me a player I missed out on, and your projection for a breakout Tennessee Volunteer. So yeah, there is some potential and some talent at these positions, but a lot is unproven, and how are they going to do against this schedule? Well, let's take a look. So as we take a look at their schedule, in week 1 they will open up at Neyland Stadium against Bowling Green. This is a game that Tennessee must win, and I really don't think there's any way they lose, but yet again, they did say that about Georgia State back in 2019, but I don't think we're going to have a repeat of that, and Tennessee will start out 1-0. The following week, we have a pretty interesting game as Pitt will come to Knoxville for a game that, in my opinion, will be 50-50. The Panthers have a decent amount of experience, and they have a super senior quarterback in Kenny Pickett, so in my eyes, this will be a 50-50 matchup. I don't think Pitt's going to win the ACC by any means, but they should be one of the better teams in the conference, and this will be the first real test for Josh Heupel. As of right now, I'm going to say Pitt's going to win this game, only because I don't think Tennessee's going to have it all figured out quite yet. If they played later on in the year, I would give the nod to the Volunteers, but for right now, we're going to say Tennessee goes 1-1. They get a home game against Tennessee Tech in week 3, and this should push their record to 2-1 before things start to get difficult once again. They open up SEC play on the road in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium against the Florida Gators. Tennessee's not really been able to put up much of a fight against them in the last few years, and I don't think it's going to be any different this year. While the Gators will have to replace the 3 Ks in Kyle Pitts, Kyle Trask, and Kadarius Toney, I think they have more talent, and with this game being at Florida, I don't think Tennessee's going to win. They're now 2-2. Next up, we have a pretty interesting matchup, as many would say that Tennessee has kind of owned Missouri as of late. They are not necessarily wrong, but I think Missouri is going to win this game. If this was at home, I would pick the Volunteers, but after the blowout that the Volunteers gave Missouri last year, I think Missouri is going to come out and win this game by a score or 2. I could be wrong though. Next, they get to come back home and play South Carolina, and this is where I think they get their first SEC win, as they will beat first-year head coach Shane Beamer. While I'm not a hater on the Beamer hire, I do think the Gamecocks could have done better, and I really don't like their roster or their quarterback situation right now. So I think Tennessee is going to have the ability to put up more points, and I think they have more talent than the Gamecocks. So we're going to go ahead and say that Tennessee is 3-3 at this point. Next, they have a fun game at home against Ole Miss. Ole Miss should have one of the most electric offenses in the country, led by Matt Corral and the Lane Train, and this game could be a shootout. If Ole Miss does not figure out their defense, then Tennessee could very well hang around in this game and maybe pull off the upset. For now though, I think Ole Miss has about a 70% chance to win this game, and I'm going to go with the Rebels. But do not be surprised if Tennessee upsets. Unfortunately, they have to go on the road to Alabama, and there's not a whole lot of analysis I have to put into this, because there's no way that Tennessee wins, and outside of maybe 1 or 2 teams, I don't think anyone else in the country would really put up a fight in Bryant-Denny Stadium, so that's no knock on Tennessee, but it's just not happening. At this point, they have 3 wins, and they would need to win 3 of their last 4 games to make a bowl, and they have a chance to do that. It first starts with a road game against Kentucky, and while many think the Wildcats will finish 3rd in the SEC East, I'm somewhat skeptical. I think Kentucky is a good team, and they have the potential to be near the top of the division, but they have got to figure out the quarterback situation, as apparently neither Gatewood or Levis have really shown that they're going to be the guy, and without a good quarterback, Kentucky's kind of doomed. While Kentucky did kill the Volunteers last year, but at the end of the day, I think they will keep this one close, and I'm actually predicting an upset in here, as I really haven't given Tennessee the benefit of the doubt quite yet, and I think after losing close games to Ole Miss, Missouri, and Pitt, they are going to go on the road and beat Kentucky and get revenge for last year, and that will put Tennessee at 4 wins. Next, they get Georgia at home, and while the crowd should be electric and this could potentially be a good game, I think JT Daniels and the Bulldogs will have it in cruise control by halftime, and Georgia will come out with a win. At this point, Tennessee is 4-6 going into their final 2 games, but do not worry, Volunteers fans, you have an opportunity to make a bowl game here. At first, you play South Alabama at home, who's under a first-year head coach, and they're just not exactly an SEC-level team, so I think Tennessee wins that, and that gets them to 5 wins. Finally, they play Vanderbilt, and while the last time we saw these 2 teams battle for bowl eligibility in 2018, the Commodores won, I don't think Clark Lee and this Vanderbilt team is any good at all. Tennessee is going to go ahead and win by a couple scores against the Commodores at home, and that will get them to 6-6. The Tennessee fan base's expectations are not out of this world for this team, and I think going 6-6 would be a great first step for Josh Heupel and this team. To re-summarize, I have them winning all the games they should win in South Alabama, Bowling Green, and Tennessee Tech, and then I have them beating South Carolina, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt in SEC play. While I don't necessarily know if they will beat the Wildcats, I think they will beat one of either Kentucky, Ole Miss, Missouri, or Pitt, and that'll get them to 6. What do you guys think though? If you're a Tennessee fan, let me know what I got right and what I got wrong, what your prediction for this year's team is, and your expectations for Josh Heupel and the program moving forward. If you're not a Tennessee fan though, let me know your thoughts on my analysis. Give me what team I should do next. Hit that like button, subscribe if you are new here, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. And I hope to see you guys again soon. But until next time, peace.